Hey friends, Seeking Our Spirit is back with another great episode for you. With my friend Melissa Feasting. She came out to share her story. We had a great time, so I hope you enjoy. As always, want to encourage you all to come out and be on the show as well, or send me names of folks that you think would be great. Contact me at seekingourspirit@gmail.com. As always, like and share the episodes, and if you can, hit the support button and support what we're doing. Thanks to everybody who has done that so far, and we'll keep this going. Thanks so much. Enjoy. All right, my friend Melissa Feasting. We are rolling. It's good to be with you this morning. Thank you for inviting me into your home and being willing to journey with me in this process. I was chuckling. You haven't heard this episode yet, but I was chuckling when Blake and I did this because I think you run into the same category. I think you guys both stepped up because you got sick and tired of hearing me say,
yes.
This isn't going to last if people don't step up. So, as I said to her, I will say to you, thank you for being willing to journey with me and do this with me.
You're welcome. For the listener's perspective, both Blake and I got bullied into doing this, but very nice bullying.
Yes, I'm pretty rough on people, yeah.
So,
as always, as a way to jump in, why don't you just tell folks who you are, what you do, where you're from, that kind of stuff.
Sure. So, my name's Melissa Feasting. I'm in my early 30s, and I'm originally from Central Illinois. Grew up there. But now I live in Knoxville, Tennessee for the last 4 years, and I do research. I work for a nonprofit that's headquartered here in Knoxville, even though we're fully remote now. But I have a quirky job that I didn't know existed when I was getting my PhD in psychology. But I collected data on what everyone who works for a college and university is paid. And that takes a lot of effort, and then we sell that data back. And so I teach people how to use the data, and I analyze the data and create reports, interactive graphics for people to kind of figure out what's going on with compensation and diversity and equity in higher ed.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Anything else about life? Doesn't have to be.
Doesn't have to be.
Yeah. You were a parishioner at St. Elizabeth.
Yes, I should
me.
probably say that.
Nice.
That's how I know Brett.
Yes.
Is I met him at St. E's. I'm in the choir, and so people still don't necessarily know in the congregation I'm around because I'm hiding upstairs every Sunday.
You guys have your own mini congregations.
Yes, I'm also an avid tennis player. It's just me and my cat in the house, and that's good. But my parents moved from Illinois about a year ago, and they're 6 minutes away. And so,
nice. And you're a pilot.
Yes.
We should say that. That's cool. Yeah. I just actually learned that. So anyway, awesome. Well, good stuff. So where do you enter into this conversation about spirituality? When you think about Melissa's spiritual life, where does that begin for you? Is that church? Is that,
Yeah, so it's not church, but I think I have to talk about church to explain why that is, because I would actually say that my spiritual life truly kicked in college. Okay. And
That's a new one.
Right. Right. I know, right? The opposite of what you would think. Looking back, I was definitely having spiritual experiences, but I didn't have the language to actually tag those and understand. But preparing for this podcast and even before that, I kind of have been looking back and being like, oh.
Sure, you and I have done some of that work.
We've done that work. Yeah, that's the other thing to the listeners. I do spiritual direction with Brett. Let's just start for the religion with the spirit. And for me, spirituality is that experience of realizing you're getting knowledge that's way out of yourself and is way wiser than yourself. I kind of call it sometimes one of my therapists used to call it the wiser self, but she was always talking about God. Is what I totally think. Kind of that voice.
That was her name.
That was her name
for a higher power.
Okay. But I grew up Catholic, and so both of my parents were raised Catholic. My dad is so Catholic that he grew up in a tiny town where there was just one church, and it was a Catholic church. And in public school, nuns taught them.
Sure.
Yeah, like it was in
public
school.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the nuns taught them in the public school. So like super Catholic. And I feel like now that I've been meeting more people who are Catholic now, there's actually a lot bigger variety in what that experience looks like. But
than what you sort of
than what I
offered.
experienced and got offered. And the way I would kind of explain it is that I was taught that like basically religion growing up, like the way it was delivered to me, like religion was all about thinking about what happens when you die. And basically it's about making sure you go to heaven.
Yeah, which is one of my big tips all the time, right?
Yeah. And that's basically what it was. And basically I was delivered with a checklist of like, you must believe everything the Catholic people say. Like, here's your doctrine. You must believe without question. If you question, you're going to hell. And if you behave in this way, you're going to hell. And it's really interesting now being an Episcopalian because the message that I got growing up was like, yeah, Jesus died for your sins, but if you do particular sins, like you're screwed anyway. That's definitely the message. What's really interesting too is we were taught that the only way you were supposed to interface with God is basically like God would be around after you died, and he's like keeping check marks about what you're doing. But the only thing you could do was memorize prayers that were already pre-approved, and you could say those set prayers. But you were not supposed to ask God or talk to God in any other way other than those set prayers. The priest and other people were interfacing.
Right. It's for the saints.
Yes.
It's for the priests, and it's through the church.
Right. And so the only spiritual experiences that I didn't really realize that I was having was when we were singing, congregational singing. Kind of like always felt super at peace, really happy, really connected, kind of like a higher state of being. You know.
Have you ever dug into like, what do you think was operating there? Like why do you think? Is it just, I mean, music in general.
Yeah, music in general gets you in that space, but I think it had something to do with like all of these people focusing together on the same thing. But for whatever reason, I get in a spiritual headspace a lot easier when there's music around. And it's not me just listening to music. I have to be actually participating in it.
Yeah, it's probably more than we can talk about here, but I think that's such a fascinating, I've touched on it in other episodes with other folks, but it's such a fascinating sort of thing to explore, because it feels almost somewhat universal. And then even when both looking at like sacred music through the church, but then also if you look at like indigenous tribal practice stuff, you know, shaman, whatever, that all as well, like music is vital to that experience as well. So.
It's always there. And some of the atheists in my life would say that like the music is just making your brainwaves feel like you're in that mindset, but I would say that music for me helps me easily get more to a mindset where I'm open to like listening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And just kind of feeling. Because like it really doesn't usually work if I'm just listening. I have to be actually singing.
And that part is interesting to me too. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So sort of that was like your experiential level of spirituality in the church was through music.
But I didn't know that that's really what was happening, and like we weren't supposed to be having these spiritual experiences. There was like I wasn't super aware that there were other denominations, but I was aware that they're like, we are very staid here. We are serious Catholics, and you're not supposed to be like having holy ecstasy, right? Like you're not supposed to be doing that. And so until about the time I was 9, I actually looked this up. I was 9. Through the time I was 9, we had this like super benevolent, awesome priest named Father Doug, who like, he's just the best. He was like into the kids, and like he like I had to look back on this like mentally, but like he kind of radiated peace and love, like, and just a very calming presence. They took him out of our church to go to another failing church, and we got a new priest who stood up there and said, women can't participate in the service because they're unclean. And so we couldn't have altar girls. Women couldn't read the Bible verses anymore during the service. I mean, women couldn't participate. I was like 9 or 10.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the messages I was getting at church. It was pretty brutal.
Yeah. No, another subject that we could talk a long time
forever.
about that that's always fascinated me about the Catholic Church is like how drastically different it can look from one priest to another.
Yep.
Especially in a religious structure that is so ordered. You would think there would be more of a like top-down decision that the bishop in that area would say
this is how we're doing it.
Right.
And I think looking back, that's kind of what bothers me the most is because the narrative that I got of Catholicism is like, we are one.
Yeah.
It is the same everywhere. But actually like, and I'd be actually a lot more comfortable with variety if they didn't have that narrative. But yeah, like it's so structured, but it is not the same.
Yeah, and then you're just expected to not question the difference between the clergy.
Because questioning's a sin, man.
My grandfather was very devout Catholic, and I don't think it was as of a like intense kind of context that you're talking about, but I saw that in him in later life. When I became a priest, he would want to take communion from me when he was visiting, and dependent upon who his Catholic priest currently was in Florida, he would ask that priest, and that priest, in that opinion about whether or not he could take communion from me would change. And he just he wouldn't even question that or doubt, or he just would go, okay, well, Father so-and-so says I can, cool. Father other so-and-so says I can't, so I won't. It's like, oh.
I think
okay.
I was totally taught to just accept this is the answer now.
Yeah.
This is the absolute answer now. The answer might change, but don't worry about it because like they just got more insight from God.
Yeah.
And that's why the answer, don't worry about it, but like just obey whatever you are told.
So fascinating.
Yeah, so
okay, so Father
Doug left.
But what's his Tom? New guy?
I don't.
Oh, he's not worth remembering.
He's not worth remembering his name.
Okay, but that guy comes in.
It's just rough.
Yeah.
And like we were weekly churchgoers, and like we continued to go, and like eventually we didn't have the conversations in my home, but I know that like my parents were obviously having conversations, and they moved us to a different church across town, and I was still doing like the Wednesday night CCD where they continued to kind of like reaffirm that like you don't question anything, here's what you're supposed to believe. CCD is so if you're a bad kid who doesn't go to Catholic school and you go to public school and don't choose to support the Catholic Church with your tuition dollars, your kids have to go after school on Wednesday nights to get religion class.
What does that stand for?
So it's like, well, it ended up being PSR, Parish School Religion.
Okay, all right.
But I can't remember what the CCD acronym was.
Okay, so you're going to that.
I'm going to that. We're in a different church, but it's, even though like women can participate, it's not much better. Yeah. And so I just kind of decide that like, I don't believe this stuff because I just feel a lot of shame because by then like I was questioning, which was a sin, had done a lot of things that like would automatically put me to hell. Yeah. And then by the time I go to like college, all my friends are queer. They're going to hell. And then I realized that like, oops, me too. And like, I couldn't, after like college once I entered college, I couldn't go into a Catholic church, and I had to for like larger family gatherings. I would just break down in tears. Certainty, like with the certainty knowing that like this thing was judging me and like it was gonna suck once I died. Yeah. And there was no way of fixing it.
Yeah. So just that, I mean, well, you already went there, but even before that, I was just saying like already you see that theme of just an immense weight of guilt, shame, and then what's so difficult is that becomes then paired with your experience of God. Yep. And how you untangle, how you detangle or untangle church experience and actual God spiritual experience. Not that the two can't coexist, but
right. And I'm still working on that.
Yeah, sure.
Because like even the word God still has like a lot of like, I don't really use the word God a lot because I'm still, when I say God, I think Catholic judging God who like is putting me in the pit. Old
God,
Testament God
Mm-hmm.
with big, fluffy, white eyebrows. Like crazy.
He was very ticked off for some reason we don't understand. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in college, the spirituality came in because, and I know you've said this in the podcast, you're waiting for it. My sorority house was haunted.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, like you've been waiting for this, right? And this is going to sound really weird. And the way that this kind of like came down is that I was like a first semester freshman, second semester, and like to get initiated into the sorority.
And where is this?
Oh, sorry. I went to a small school called Illinois Wesleyan University in Bloomington, Illinois.
Okay.
And I was in a music
So
sorority.
did not go to a Catholic university.
I did not. It used to be Methodist, but it wasn't by the time I had like very specifically said I refused to go to a religious affiliated school.
Sorry to derail you. Just
No,
curious.
it's all good. And so I was in a music sorority because I was in choir. That was the first thing I did upon kind of getting in. And
so that's interesting. So that experiential level was so strong that influenced your decision making and sort of life path.
It did. Yep. And basically all my friends were music majors, and I decided like, oh, I'm going to do this music sorority. And I'll get to the music didn't click in until after this experience, but like there's stuff there too. So the night that we're supposed to just like sleep over at the house, and something watched me all night. That wasn't, and I'm sure it had red eyes.
So you saw something or you felt something?
I've never seen anything, but I feel these things.
Huh.
And it just didn't feel friendly. And then there was a bathroom where it didn't feel friendly either. Huh. And then there was a room in the basement that belonged to a particular person. I'm pretty sure something was attached to her because I could not physically go into that room without getting nauseous.
Wow, interesting. Now, have you ever had experiences like that prior to that one?
Mm-hmm. In high school, I got something from a resale shop, and I had dreams of blood for 3 nights, and finally it was supposed to be for my mom's birthday, and I woke them up in the middle of the night and I said, can you please throw this in the trash?
Huh.
And my parents don't really believe, but like
the church didn't tell them they could.
No, it's like it's against the rules, man.
Kidding. I know you guys listen to this. I'm just playing.
Yes, no, it's against the rules, man. And yeah, that was one of my, but I've always been kind of like sensitive to like getting weird feelings.
Okay, but that thing you purchased was the main other
that was
experience.
The main
besides the one
big
you're telling
experience beside the one.
That's so interesting. You realize this was really freaky about that is you realize that's like the initial story of The Exorcist. Right?
Yeah, it totally is. It totally is. And like,
which is still, I don't do horror. I don't do scary stuff.
I don't either.
When I get scared, I still to this day picture that little exorcist girl. I hate it so much.
Yeah, not here for it. I don't do scary anything.
Yeah. Okay, so sorry. So you're in the sorority house. You're experiencing just this not good things.
And like
I
trust myself kind of, but I'm kind of like, Melissa, you're a little silly. Until I talked to my friend Jenny. Jenny's also super sensitive, way more sensitive than I am. And the way I got about it, triangulating it, and I was just like, so what do you think of the first floor bathroom? And she's like, there's a painting in there that's haunted. Watch people. They put the painting away sometimes, and no one admits to doing it.
Interesting.
And I don't really believe whether it's I'm not really sure, but I don't know. But like, people would randomly take one particular painting off the wall, and that's the one that I was like, yep, and they'd put it away, and then they would feel kind of better. And Jenny also lived in the house, and she had a lot of interesting experiences. I've only had one physical experience. Something tugged my skirt down. There was nothing there.
Yeah.
I was washing dishes.
Yeah.
Something tugged my skirt.
Huh. Weird.
And like things would like just kind of follow you around. You'd feel someone behind you, and there's no one behind you.
Did you talk with any other girls about it?
A couple others could feel it too, but most of them couldn't.
Okay.
But most of them would say, yeah, we've heard it's haunted.
Huh. So that was like a story. That was like a thing.
It was a thing.
I wonder what the history is now of the place. That would be interesting.
It was a doctor's office who performed illegal abortions.
Oh, that's fun.
That'll do it, probably.
Yeah.
And a lot of people didn't survive the procedure. And the bathroom is where the operatory was.
Oh, good.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so So in feeling these things, it kind of really truly clicks into that to me that there is something beyond, and a lot of part of me is kind of starting to ask for protection from something that's a lot nicer.
Yeah. Okay, so this is where it sort of comes. So
yes.
So if would it be accurate if I put it in my own words? Like, so you have this experience with the church, shame, guilt, whatever. You end up sort of desiring to reject all, right? God included.
Yeah.
Not just the religious side of that, not just the organized religious side of that. And then because you are having these other experiences, and they're not pleasant.
They're not pleasant.
It plants in you a desire for some sort of protection, some sort of positivity.
Yeah. And
or opens, I guess in a way, opens you just that there's something else out there.
It really opened me that there was something else out there, because that mere blood situation is something that like I really suppressed and didn't, I don't open up that box a lot, because like I don't like to think of what would have happened if, you know. And so it's kind of like the foxhole prayer, where like I started kind of asking for protection, and then kind of like I'm open that like there's something out there. There must be also something good, right? Which is, I don't know how I made that leap, but I'm glad I did.
I mean, it's not a far stretch.
Right, there must be something good. And so when I didn't live in the house because my experiences were so negative, but I would go there a lot. And so oftentimes when I was in there, I was like praying. But I didn't really know that was praying, because praying, once again, was just reciting the Hail Mary or the Our Father.
Right.
So I didn't really understand that me like asking for protection.
Were you just lobbing to the universe?
Yeah,
like,
to the universe. I was just like,
protection.
yeah, please protect me. Please let me not feel anything, or like keep it away from me.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. And then I started in choir we were doing a lot of masses and with 35 people singing. And then I also started to have a lot more positive experiences, tapped into those same experiences I had. And so by that point, I was like starting to really more frequently talk to the universe, ask for things. And then I was starting to get kind of like guidance. I was asking for guidance, and I would start getting guidance. And I tried not to ask for like too much. I still have problems like even asking for anything, but sometimes it'd be like, what should I do about this? Or like general guidance. And so by the time I graduated, I was like talking a lot with this, and I was really that was probably when I was a senior in college, was one of the most spiritual times of my life, because I would get kind of like guided, like maybe don't go down that alley, or like on a travel trip, like maybe don't do this, you know.
Interesting. So
and it wasn't coming from me, but it's like I had this new set of instincts that would say, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe you should do this instead.
And this is still without having or needing to like couch this in any sort of like put language around. Is this God? What is this? You just naturally were, as we keep sort of just sort of to choose a word, saying universe, like you're just putting this stuff out, these feelings, these desires, these requests into the universe, and then feeling like there's some sort of relationship.
Yep. I didn't have a word for it, but I knew enough but like I had a really good sense by the time I was a senior that I knew I was going to grad school. And universe told me it's going to be very hard to maintain your spirituality in grad school. Maybe you should give yourself some reminders. And I got tattoos to like, I have a tattoo right here, and it's to remember that it's okay to believe in things that don't come from science. And so like, I kind of like had a future sense that like,
that's interesting.
Yeah, something was going to be rough. But I was really in tune at that point.
It's interesting to me that, I mean, 'cause, that's a lot in a short amount of time of life.
Yeah.
I mean, to have this intense, like, structured, organized religion experience that's negative, and then to turn pretty quickly and have, for lack of just a placeholder word, I mean, just spiritual life, That's interesting. I don't know. That's just interesting.
Yeah.
It's striking to me, I guess, that it's
Right.
just so, yeah.
But to me, that spiritual life had nothing to do with religion.
Of course, right.
Like, I was still randomly rolling up to Catholic churches, still crying my way through Catholic masses, hoping no one noticed, and just being like, these are not the same thing, and these can't be the same thing. So I didn't have any language to describe it.
I just want to name, I mean, that, I can't ever remember if I've ever talked about any of these things in prior episodes, but like, as a priest, it breaks my heart, and I didn't realize until really later, even in my ministry, I mean, I'd say in the last couple years, so like 13, 14 years into ministry, how common that story is, like how common that experience is. And I don't even mean, dear listeners, like the Catholic Church, and I have respect for the Catholic Church, I have respect for all denominations and religions, really, but so many people are walking around with this religious baggage of guilt and shame, and it just breaks my heart. I mean, it breaks my heart. So many people come to our congregation, and that's their story. They're holding on to this thing that's just eating them up inside, and it's their relationship with God of all things.
I know,
it's and like, it's really,
and it's the opposite of what God intends it to be.
Yeah, aren't we supposed to be in unity with God? In unity, isn't that what all our symbols and sacraments and everything points to? Is like, oh, I love you, forgive you, you are with me. I want you to be one with me.
Right.
Anyway.
And I don't really personally blame any one person, right? Like, I still have some beef with that guy who's like, women are unclean. But I can't blame any one person, because that's also how they're taught, and like,
sure, it just,
and like, I don't think any of these people intend to do, I don't think any person is intending to do this. It just kind of
doesn't want to hurt people.
Yeah.
It's just weird, because I think there's already naturally within most humans an inclination towards that, like feeling unworthy.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like, well, why are we helping that? Like,
because it's fun.
Like, it's already there. We don't need anybody to pour gasoline on it.
That dark part of ourselves loves it. It's like, come on, let's do this.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
It's all good.
So, you were in music, starting to express that in college.
I was in music, starting to express that.
And then you got the messaging, I guess, preparing you for grad school.
Yeah. And it was right. So, I did my PhD in social psychology, and you would think that a bunch of psychologists would actually be cool to being open to religion, but I have like a naive theory. It's not super naive since I was in the field, but so social psychologists are super into proving that they're a real science. And part of proving that they're a real science means kind of like sloughing off any of these personal, touchy-feely stuff.
Yeah.
And so to be a good scientist is to be an atheist.
Right.
And
which is rampant all over science.
Right. And we were taught that super early on, and professors openly mocked the only person who openly went to church.
That makes sense, that angle though, that like, so that's already, that bent towards atheism is already there in the science community, and then if this certain side or aspect of the science community doesn't feel fully accepted, like leaning into some things to say, that's interesting.
Right, because if you can't measure it with data, it can't exist, which I don't actually agree with. And I would say this is qualitative data. I think I'm providing some data. Like, you can't perfectly experimentally manipulate me, to be sure, but so I so wanted to be a social psychology professor. It was like my obsession. I put everything into it. And I was miserable in grad school. It didn't take long. It was about 5 months before they were like, to be this professor, this serious, you need to and so I tried super hard, and I cut that part off.
Oh, okay.
Meanwhile, I was no longer in choir. I tried one time to go to a Catholic service early on in grad school, and I cried through that service, knew I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And
so you cut off the two main life-giving.
I cut off the life-giving things. Meanwhile, was working 80 hours a week. It was rough. And there was just a lot of turmoil, and instead of doing the foxhole prayers I did in the past, I just kind of slogged through for a long time until towards the end when I got into therapy and the therapist is talking about my wiser self, and I realized that like, oh, that's that thing that I was talking about
into,
and that's that thing that like literally told me, you're going to lose me, try to remember not to.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it real like I'm tearing up, dear listener. 'Cause like, of course, the universe knew.
Yeah.
So when I tapped in, but it wasn't like a shameful, why didn't you? It was kind of like a, no, I knew.
Yeah, right. Remember we talked about this.
Yes. And so in my 4th and 5th year of grad school, those are the last 2 years, I was still kind of miserable, but I started tapping into that again and getting more positive and hopeful views for my future. And basically the biggest message I got during that time was like, I got offered a tenure track job, what I was like working towards, and God's like, don't do it.
That was just your experientially, that was just like what
it was in my gut, and I like, and I knew, and I cried all the way on the plane ride home because it was like my dream job.
Wow.
And God's like, don't do it. Like, this is not right for you. And the reason being is that like, I could have done that job really well, but I couldn't have had a life. My parents would have been far away. I was moving once again completely alone to a new state. I would have had good colleagues there, but the amount of work to do that job well, like I wouldn't have.
Is everything.
Yeah. Like I would have had to only be that.
Right.
And like, that's not really healthy for me.
Yeah.
And I get that now.
Or anyone. Yeah.
Yeah. So, or anyone. I agree. And so that was like really intense. And so that's like when the rubber meets the road, because I'm like, I'm going to listen to that. And I turned it
That's
down.
that's huge. And the fact that you had just sort of come back to that relationship with God, or whatever we're calling that.
Yeah. Right. Yep. And so I ended up getting a job here in Knoxville, and universe is like, yeah, you're supposed to go to Knoxville, you idiot. By now it's still kind of playful, but basically I applied to jobs. I talked with my family, and I talked about, they knew that they were retiring and they wanted to move out of Illinois, and so we had a list of like 10 southern cities where they would consider retiring to. Because I'm like, I think things will go better if I'm near my family. I'm an only child, really close to them. And so Knoxville ended up being the place. And I was like still in touch, and about 3 months after I got here, it's like, you need a church. And this came in one of those coincidence things.
And so is this all gut? Yeah. I mean, so like, so far, like there was music, I mean, there's that, I don't know what category we put that in, of like spirit, ghost stuff. You know, and then
I think it's
and then
gut.
it feels like gut, you know, like just a knowing.
Gut.
Because this isn't audible for you.
No,
like
I
what
never
you're describing.
hear anything.
It's sort of intuition in a sense.
Yep, at that point, all intuition, and then people came in. And the first question that everyone in Knoxville constantly asked me was, where do you go to church? And I don't, and like, that's a cultural thing.
Yeah. But for you, there was more meaning to it.
But there's a lot more meaning to it for me. Like, I was bombarded.
Yeah.
Like, that's the first, because, and also what's funny is, like, I still meet new people all the time, and people don't ask me that anymore.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So it was a sign, and so I told myself, you're looking for a choir, girl.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that St. E's was, I was like I Googled denominations that would say, hey, you're bi, you can still come in our doors, and it's cool. So I Googled that, and then St. E's was doing a piece, the Faure Requiem, the choir was, that I knew already and is my favorite. It's a funeral mass. It's 45 minutes long in Latin. It's hardcore, man. You know, what you gonna do? And I'm like, I know this. I haven't sung it for 5 years, maybe 6, but I know this like super well.
Like, had you come a few times already or no?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No. But I found, I'm like, okay, they're doing the Far Away Requiem. I know that.
You just saw that, like, advertised?
Advertised,
Oh,
yeah, on the website. And so I come in, and people again, Mother Donna comes out. The Mother Donna is a retired priest in our congregation, dear listener. She comes out of nowhere, and she's like, hi. And I'm like, oh, hi. And I'm like interested in maybe joining the choir. And she drugged me up to the choir loft the first time I was here, and they haven't let me leave since.
Oh, God bless Mother Donna.
Yeah.
She does a good job at that.
She does.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how she, like, found me. I, like, sat in the pew for all of 30 seconds.
She feels the newness come in.
She does. Like,
there's someone new here.
I was sitting in that pew for like 30 seconds, and she swoops out of nowhere, and all of a sudden, 5 minutes later, I'm wearing a robe. and like,
fun.
And so I liked it because it was like very familiar.
Right. The liturgy.
The liturgy's very familiar. I know some of the hymns, but I still got to do the hymns, and it was just this really life-giving experience to like be back singing in a choir. I get the most out of like the music, participating in the music, but it was really cool and really life-giving. And so I decide, oh, this is really cool. And I go to inquirer's class, which is like how to learn to be an Episcopalian. And I think it was our first session where you're discussing like just talking with God, and I broke down in tears because I was like, you're allowed to do that? And that's when I realized that that's what I've been doing this whole time. And that thing had a place in religion somewhere.
Yeah.
And it just blew my mind that this thing I'd been doing actually, like, a religion acknowledged it.
Yeah.
And I was
I
like,
think
really
it was
confused.
like a discussion on, I think it was on like prayer practices and spirituality, and was just sort of like, I think I was trying my best to explain, like, really at the heart of all that we're doing is to be in relationship with God.
Right. And
so
it like
whatever it takes to do that is.
Yeah. And I was just crying in front of these near strangers, realizing, because it was like, I realized that like prayer didn't just have to be me reciting memorized lines, that I could like actually have a conversation, and or
be like through me doing the liturgy in the church.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Right. Like that was not the only way.
Yeah.
Like you could be talking, it could be really informal. You could have practices that were relatively informal. I mean, that changed everything for me to realize that like, oh, because it gave me a lot of language to what I was doing. And sometimes when you get that language, it actually makes it easier to like work on those skills. And you also like were able to give like tools.
Yeah. I think it was a moment where like I think you were describing almost like and like basically like I remember so clearly, but I don't remember the words, but it was like, yeah, that's prayer. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were like, what?
And I was like, what? Like my eyes were wide, and I was like, whoa. Like it completely like threw me. And I was like, what? This is what I've been doing? But that is not what they taught us to do in Catholic school at all. That is not, like, God doesn't want a relationship with me. What the heck is this stuff?
Yeah. Just looking at that whole timeline in from a bird eye view is interesting. I mean, because at least in your experience of it, it seems very clear that there's like a guidance to it.
Yeah.
I don't know if plan is too strong of a word, but there's like a guidance to it. So it just sort of it's just very interesting. It's sort of like, well, I wonder why, because there was this like foundational sort of experience, desert period, connection returning, and then like a rebirth kind of, death and resurrection theme a little bit, like, rebirth of something new. Yeah, it's interesting.
So it was awesome. Started doing like spiritual direction and stuff, but about that time is when COVID hit, and so there's no more. Yeah. That's another desert period.
Yeah,
like it
for
was,
us all. Yeah.
It was still there, but it's just like, COVID sucked. Obviously. And I didn't even have a close loved one die of COVID, and COVID still sucked because I like lived alone.
And your parents weren't here.
They weren't here yet. So I I stayed with them for a few weeks
Yeah.
up in Illinois, but for the most part, I was like here
Right.
just me.
Right.
Like I was that person who would randomly talk too much to people at the grocery store. And they would give you this look like, oh, this lady needs to stop talking. But it's like I hadn't seen a human for 4 days.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah, it was rough times.
Yeah. But like after things started like getting more safe, like we started in spiritual direction again, and that really helped. And like Lectio Divina started up. I get a lot out of Lectio. You're gonna hate this, but I get more out of Lectio than usually a service.
Yeah, what? No,
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. It's an
But
ancient prayer practice.
yeah,
It's
like,
survived for a reason.
For a reason.
I do it for a reason.
Yeah. And so I kind of started reconnecting again, and I get guidance that like kind of to change some stuff up. I get a new therapist. There's other stuff that's going on in midst, but it's kind of like a dark period of the soul. And the guidance is like, get a new therapist. Got a new therapist, and within a couple of months, I had like a very traumatic experience happen that if I had had no therapist, like I don't really know like what I would have done. But, you know, the cool thing, dear listener, is like I don't advise having truly traumatic experiences to get more spiritual experiences, but oh boy, it works.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of interesting experiences after that of coincidence where I'd be reading to take my mind off things, and things would happen in the book that would basically be like, this is why you shouldn't feel bad, Melissa. This, not bad about that this happened to you, but why you shouldn't feel shame and like you brought this upon yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was really cool. And it
which
happened constantly. And I wasn't seeking out books that would have this.
That content.
Yeah, it was kind of wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
And through through the experience, like I got a lot of, I didn't realize it at the time, but my gut knew kind of like what to do afterwards to kind of like take care of myself and make myself immediately safe, which was like really nice. And then probably the most positive experience was not a positive experience, but a few months later for work, I had to go to a context that was basically the same as where this experience happened, and I was PTSD city, and it was for work. So, but I had to be like super professional,
Right.
Melissa, and like I didn't want anyone to like know that I was having a lot of problems because it's just really complex. Out of nowhere, like I'm like losing it. Out of nowhere, like a woman I just kind of tangentially know came out of nowhere and just starts talking to me, and she's like throwing positive, she's like praying over me but not saying that. I felt it. Like she was like throwing good energy at me, and she was talking about like, she just out of nowhere came over and she's like, I heard that you sing in a choir, but I'm like, I don't even know how she could know that.
Yeah.
And so she's like talking about my church community, and we're talking about each other's church communities, and she's just throwing all this positive energy at me at a time that like I was losing it, and that's the only thing that let me get through the rest of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've never experienced that again, and I've talked to her a ton since, and it's not
like that.
Like that, and I don't even know how to describe it, but it's pretty cool.
So much there too. It's like, I don't know. I keep thinking about that whole conversation about like the science world and atheists and all this, and then yet you have all these experiences in your life. So it's like, and I don't know that we want to go and have this whole conversation in this format, but like, it sort of brings me to that place of going, well, a person is having these experiences. They mean something.
Yeah.
Like, who cares what we call it? Like, why would we discount if it's helping?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, okay, to play devil's advocate a little bit, like, say we die and it is all just nothing, and there is no whatever we call God and whatever, all that stuff. Who cares? At least
we had
this thing was positive in our life and we embraced it and went with it. Right?
Yeah.
Like why? So why? What's this desire to completely shun all of that? That just, it blows my mind a little bit. Because like, just look at your story in your life and like how important that guidance, that presence, that was to you, you know.
Yeah.
And imagine had you just completely deleted all of that.
Yeah, if I had deleted a lot of it,
Shunned
like I can like totally map out how much worse my life would not be as fulfilling, or it would have been like super hard to get through parts of my life that were already very hard to get through.
Yeah.
And like it would just not, it would kind of be like my life would be in black and white instead of like Technicolor is the way I would explain it. And I would argue I have a crap ton of data to suggest that like I'm having these experiences, it's helpful. I don't know what happens afterwards. That's fine. And I'm a lot less concerned about that. I'm a lot less concerned about that. The more and more I work on it, it's more like, well, how much can I experience God, universe, whatever, here and now in my life, regardless of what happens afterwards.
I know we've talked about this before, like in spiritual direction, but you know, you sort of mentioned like still somewhat struggling with using even just the word God. Like, so do you, is obviously we're a Trinitarian denomination, right? Father, Son, Holy Spirit being one God. Like, do you feel more comfortable with other aspects of the Trinity? Like, is Jesus more approachable to you, or the Holy Spirit, or? It's
the Holy Spirit. Yeah. Like, the Holy Spirit makes sense to me. I feel like that's what I've been meshing with. I'm still working on trying to like really use the word God for myself. Usually I'm saying universe.
Yeah.
But
which again to me is all semantics, really.
It's all semantics. It's a trick.
Right.
It's a trick.
Especially from that Trinitarian standpoint, like that.
It really is all the
Holy
same.
Spirit is God, right?
Yeah, it is all the same.
And I don't mind even saying universe is God or God is universe.
Right. And so it's not really Jesus. It's not God. Spirit makes sense. Yeah. And so from that spirit though, I'm just like, okay, that's what the rest of it is. Because I can really get tripped up into God being Catholic God.
Right.
Really easily.
Yeah, you just go back to that emotional level of like the guilt and shame stuff.
Yeah.
I had another question there, but it's gone. He'll come back. Yeah. What else would you name? I mean, that sort of brings you up to now-ish.
Yeah, that brings me up to now-ish, and I feel like I'm in that second half of life, Richard Rohr space, where it's like, you got here, now what are you gonna, else are you gonna do? And I'm still trying to figure out what that is, but that's okay.
Listening to the Spirit's a good start.
Yeah,
I think like, that's pretty, if we all did that, that would probably be good.
Like, it got me to some good places, so I'm kind of working on that. Working on more, like, I've been trying to do the daily examine. It hasn't been daily, but, I think even having it come up on my calendar every day at 4:30 p.m. Makes me, at some other point of the day, like, just talk.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, for folks listening that don't know what that is, that's another contemplative practice that comes out of St. Ignatius' teachings, and is basically doing a review of your day with God. So it is a way to interact with and speak to God. I think what I was sort of thinking about a moment there ago, you named it too, of just, it's yet again that uncomfortable space and that theme that comes up a lot in conversations about spirituality of for whatever reason, sometimes through great suffering, we are brought to, maybe out of just necessity, right? But brought to Holy Spirit or God or Jesus,
Yeah, it's in times of, so I like, in times of great suffering, I tend to like often shut out God, but then things get better once I kind of like reopen that portal. It's kind of like I'm a hedgehog or an armadillo, I guess, that just kind of doesn't want anything coming in. But it's interesting because I can like see things that like aren't actually coincidences, that like also God prepares me for bad things that are going to happen. Whether I know it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those are places that, man, it's so hard to put words around that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it's hard to explain.
Because we don't want to say that God
no, I don't
knows or allows or pulls a Job on us, and like works with,
And I don't want to spend a lot of time thinking about that either, right? Like after the traumatic experience happened, I was like really pissed at God that it happened to me.
Sure.
And I was like, so I've been talking to you. Why didn't you?
Yeah.
Help prevent this? But like that's not how it works. Like it doesn't happen that it's like, even if you're in tune with God, it's not that it's all going to be like sunshine and rainbows and winning lottery tickets.
Yeah, I think the only like language that makes sense to me around stuff like that, at least in the Christian world, is which actually I could argue is similar language in other world religions, but is just that this God that we talk about suffers with us somehow. Yeah. Which is his own set of complicated theological stuff.
Stuff to like chew through.
That God could be, that the thing that we call God that's so undefinable could have feelings, could suffer, could,
with us. And even cares. I mean, that's one of the reasons that the Daily Examine has been so interesting, because the way I was taught to do the Daily Examine was like, there's a YouTube video from, I think it's like there's a website. There's like an official Daily Examine website. And it's just showing like a young guy, like he's in school and he's worried about a test. And it's like, God cares about that and like kind of feels the anxiety with you, but says, let's calm down. And that's just so crazy that it's like, oh, the universe might care about whether I'm nervous about my test or not. Maybe he cares about other things.
Yeah, it's weird. And that's where that all gets weird for me personally.
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking anybody that feels this way, but it's like, I personally can wrap my head around being in tune with this higher power, God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and that God would suffer with the world, right? But I start to get uncomfortable when it's like, oh, God gave me the perfect coffee mug today. Like that's where it sort of like breaks down for me. I'm going,
I don't think so.
Yeah. Or like total puppet master God, like pulling all the strings, or,
Yeah, and that's why I still don't ask for much. It's only like, I try to listen for big things. I don't know, but yeah, I don't like the thought that like God's using power to give me an awesome coffee mug when like that power could be used for some other things going on. Maybe.
But what a, I mean, it's interesting because you and I have done lots of spiritual direction together and Lectio Divina, and so we've heard a lot of each other's stories. But I had never heard sort of the whole timeline.
The full timeline, yeah.
And so it's just interesting, and it comes across. What comes across really strongly to me is just like what a blessing that just was always naturally there in you. What a gift.
Yeah, it is.
Even though it was people tried to sort of strangle it out or snuff it out, but I mean, I can totally say, given that I have these conversations with so many people, that that's not the case for many people. For most people, I would say.
Yeah, I'm lucky it came naturally because no one was going to teach me how to do it.
Right, it wasn't. That's what's really fascinating to me about it, is like the church didn't teach you about it. None of it was taught. It just simply was there experientially.
Yeah, so I feel really lucky because like my life would be a lot flatter without it, like a lot different. It would feel completely different. More like going through the motions.
Yeah. I mean, this is all just a bunch of what ifs, but it's like, I just wonder, I mean, because it's sort of a beautiful kind of love story with God. I'm going to use God and not the universe, but like, like to have this beautiful gift within it from various levels and angles, it different bodies, entities tried to snuff that out, and then to find your way back to understanding that voice or that guidance.
Yeah. And
then to try to re-embrace that back into that, listen to that in your daily life. It's just a beautiful kind of full circle. And I'm sure there will be times in life still that you know, that voice is less clear, but you know, or that sense is less clear.
Yeah. But yeah, it's totally secular.
Yeah.
And it kind of gets better every time I come back. Like, I can look back. Every time I like do another cycle of like shut off, come back in, I get even more in tune.
Yeah, you and I may have talked about this separately, but it's, yeah, I find in my own life, the first time, that first desert time, that first wilderness wandering time, I wouldn't go as far to say that I had like a dark night of the soul, the way that gets. I think that when we read about the saints that have that, that's perhaps a different thing than what I experienced, but it was the darkest thing I'd ever experienced, and that was really rough, and I can still remember that very clearly, and then have had countless since then, but sort of like you're saying, like nothing was ever as bad as that first one, and then once you go through sort of a wandering in a wilderness period and know it's okay, and God actually is still there, and there's just something going on with me or whatever, like it just every single time is easier.
Yeah.
It's not this big crazy thing, life-shattering thing anymore.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
It's still not fun.
It's not fun. I mean, I don't recommend it, but I know everyone probably goes through it.
And I guess that's just experience. Really, what we're saying is that's just well, you've experienced it before, so it's not the same. But it's like, okay, I know what this is.
But it's also comforting to know that it's not that God's going away. It's just like my radio is broken. Like it's on my end, right? It's not. Yeah. It's still there.
Well, and that there doesn't need to be any guilt or shame around that either, right?
Yeah.
Like that's okay. One, it's nice that we noticed that the signal's gotten, to use your analogy, the signal's gotten wacky. You know, that's actually a great thing. Now you know. Yeah. And now, like, how do we recalibrate that? You know?
Yeah, I never get shameful in Lectio for periods. I'll get like, "How about you listen to me now?" But it's never shame. It's always like, it's usually either playful or like, "Come on," you know, like. But it's never disappointment. It's never negative. And that's when I started doing Lectio. That's how I kind of figured out what was like me versus something else, because me was always kind of negative. Yeah. And so I knew that like, that's not you. Yeah. Listen to the positive thing, and that's probably not you. Yeah. It's so hard because I keep almost wanting to slip into like spiritual direction mode with you in this conversation, but like, that's what you just said is like, we may have touched on that in direction sessions, but like, then all of a sudden that God that you keep not wanting to use that word, and the Catholic Church God and self are actually all intertwined. Oh yeah, Catholic. They're actually the same thing. You're so right. Yeah, like that's that negative. When I started doing Lectio, like self was like Catholic God. Yeah. And that's like the messages are super on brand. Yeah. And that's like, and to do Lectio successfully, I have to like pick out that like, don't listen to like that interpretation, listen to this other thing that's a lot more positive. I think that's such a powerful gift though, just that realization, because then now you can actually disassociate God from that voice. Yep. Because now you go, oh no, that's actually me. You know, and so then you free up the rest. This understanding of spirit, God, Jesus, you know. And the nice thing is the more I do Lectio, the less I'm hearing Catholic God. Like occasionally it happens, but it took a while. But like now it's more like I zero in, and maybe it's there somewhere, but I don't. Right. I don't feed that side of it, and so. Yeah. I hope people listening who is, I'm imagining there's some like very literal thinking person out there going like, they actually think there's a Catholic God and there's a separate God. No. It's all one thing, all one God. It's just language, people. Yes. Well, so what do you know, you named some pretty intense stuff. I always ask people at the end, like, what is your quote unquote most powerful or meaningful spiritual experience of your life? Did you already name it, or did you save something up for me? I think I named them all. Yeah. Like, and I think there's a lot of them. Yeah. But it's kind of like every time I got guidance, and that one time that Susan was just like pouring that positive energy into me, and like no other conversation with her felt the same, even though she's a super nice lady.
Yeah.
I mean, it's cool to have the comparison, right?
Yeah. I would be fascinated. I mean, you probably don't have the kind of relationship with her that you could do this, but I would love to be able to ask her, like, were you praying for me?
I'm actually, if I ever see her again in person, I think I should totally ask her, because I do know that she is tapped into this sort of stuff too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I'm repeating myself, but what a gift. I mean, I think I say this oftentimes, but I'm amazed at how, and I hope this doesn't sound arrogant in my saying it. I'm not trying to say like, oh, there's some people are better than others or anything like that, but it makes me sad sometimes to talk to people who are faithful, loving, wonderful, upstanding folks. They go to church, they pray in church, all that, but they would say they've never felt whatever it is we're talking about, some sort of more internal, experiential, I don't have the words for it really. Spiritual is the only word I have for it, which is why we do this show, you know. So what a gift, you know. Yeah,
I agree. And because I feel like I really haven't done the work,
yeah.
but I got the benefit.
That's a whole other weird topic to go down. Like,
but because I know tons of people who do the work way better than I do. They're just like way better at this than I am, and they still don't.
Yeah, that's
yeah. It's like, why me? But I can't question that, and I can't like feel shame about that.
Yeah, good stuff. Do you have anything else that you want to name? You want to talk about? You want to go through?
No, I think that does it. I do recommend spiritual direction.
Yeah. If folks are out there and want to do spiritual direction, check me out. Or there's a whole universe of spiritual directors out there you can find if you Google. There's places you can find folks who are all over the country and the world. So yeah, highly recommend.
Awesome.
Good deal. Well, thanks, Melissa. Thanks for doing this with me. It was a pleasure and a joy. Thanks for your hospitality again. And we'll catch you soon.
You're welcome. See you soon.
Take care.